Today, we're going to do something that I've always wanted to do. Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today brings us to Ocala, Florida, and we are at the Don Garlits Museum of Drag Racing. Now the interesting thing about this is that Don Garlits is a racing legend. He is a drag racing icon known as the godfather of drag racing, and we are going to take a tour of this museum today with Don Garlits himself. This is something we've wanted to do for a really long time, and he's 93 years young. He has a lot of experience. He is one of the most iconic race drivers in history, and today we are going to meet up with the man himself, and he's going to tell us a little bit about some of the cars that are in this collection. So let's check it out.
This tells you why this place is here and how it got here. We will be celebrating 50 years open next year in 2026. It was formed in 1976 when my wife and I went to England. We lived down in Sefton, which is a suburb of Tampa. It was out in the country in the old days. Now it's almost tied right into Tampa. And we owned the property next door, which was 16 acres. And we went to England on a tour, a 3-week tour, a race, a week off, and a race. And the week off was insurance in case of a rain on the first event. They had lots of advertising out, and they needed some place to go if it rained. Well, it didn't rain. They had 30,000 people, and they made a lot of money. And so they were just tickled to death. So they took my wife and I on a tour of the British Car Museum. And it was 2 days of almost every rich person liked cars. And they would have these cars in their barns and stuff, and they would charge people to come and see them. And it helped pay the obnoxious property taxes. So I was looking down in a case, and I looked at it. There was a set of nail clippers in there, and a little tag on them that said, "These are the nail clippers that Sterling Moss clipped his nails the morning before the Italian Grand Prix, which he won." And I said to my English guide, I said, "What is so important about clipping his nails before the race?" And he said, "Well, Don," he said, "you know, the English steering wheels are real thin in diameter, and Sterling had these great big hands, and he gripped this steering wheel, and he gripped it so hard in the race, and he gets so intense, he would drive his fingernails into the palm of his hand, and the blood would start to get on the steering wheel, and it would get slick." I don't know why he just didn't wear gloves, but he liked to drive with his hands. There's a lot of guys are like, don't like gloves. I don't like them myself. And so he had to clip his nails real short to make sure he didn't do that. And I just casually said, "I got a lot of stuff like that. We ought to have a drag racing museum." And the English guy, Les Brooks was his name. He's dead now, naturally. He says, "Why don't you build one? Just like, let's go have a cup of coffee." I mean, building a museum is an awesome deal. So on the flight back, it's 9.5 hours. My wife and I discussed it, and I'll never forget the first word she says, "Honey, you know, museums don't make money." And usually they don't. You know, usually a museum is completely funded by grants and stuff. And I said, "You know, honey, sometimes it ain't about the money. Sometimes you just do something because you think that's the right thing to do." And she was a good lady, and she always went along with what I said. And she was, you know, we were married 61 years before she died. We put a 15,000 square foot building on this property next door. And that tell you how big it is. That's from this wall to this wall, and then from that wall to the next wall. So that's what it was to start with. What you see here, where all the equipment was, and then 10,000 square feet in here, and that's where the cars were. Well, we started looking. We were still racing. And we spied some property at the Brooksville exit. That's Route 50. We like Brooksville. That's where I set all those records to start with. It's a beautiful little town. It's hills. You can have a nice home there. And that's what we thought we'd do. But before that, we had the museum for 6 years on this piece of property and never had a paying customer. I know you can't hardly believe that, but everybody was a relative, a friend, a racer, a sponsor, a photographer, a journalist, but nobody like you folks. We were way out in the woods off the beaten path. And my wife was the comptroller. She'd always been the comptroller. When I opened my shop in 1956, she quit her job at Harris Paint and came out and answered the phone. She wrote all the checks. She wrote all the bills. She took all the phone calls. She took all the work in. She did it all, and my brother and I turned the wrenches. And so she was still doing that. And she did that. In fact, we were in this building, and she walked through that door in 2003, and she says to me, I was on the lathe back there making parts, and she says, honey, would you come in the office and turn on the computer for me? And I thought to myself, what's this all about? So I went in the office, and I wasn't much on computers. She'd been to school. Screen come up. It was a blue screen those days. That was the program. And she looked at me, and she said, how did you do that? Feel my hair. She had Parkinson's. It was just about all over. She lived to 2014. So anyway, in the fall of 1981, she says to me, what are we going to do with that white elephant that we've created when you can't race anymore and support it? And I said, I always thought I'd move it to the interstate. Interstate? What are you talking about? This is our home. This is the property that your mom and dad hacked out of the wilderness in 1927. There's 65 fruit trees out here they planted. We have a lake we go skiing on every afternoon. I said, no, Interstate 4. Interstate 4. She was real smart. She says, Interstate 4 is not where tourists are. That's where the people who work in Orlando and live in Tampa, or work in Tampa and live in Orlando, and they cross each other twice a day. She says, it would have to be on I-75. So we started looking, and we spied this property at Brooksville. And it looked pretty good. When you went over the bridge, over Route 50, it was plain and visible. It was a big sign. You could read it. It said, for sale. So 1982, January, about the 16th or 17th, I said to her, I just turned 50 years old, honey. How long am I going to want to be doing something? Maybe we better go look at this property and get started on this move. And she said, you're right. We better get on it. I said, how much money do we have? Remember, she's the comptroller. In about 5 minutes, she says, we can write a check for $80,000 and still have enough money in the racing account in case something goes wrong. And let me tell you, something goes wrong every so often in racing. I said, that'll do it. Let's go get that property. So we drive up to Brooksville. We go down to the property. We get the phone number off. We drive back to the interstate to the phone booth. You know, they put it like this today. And they call the number. The guy answers the phone. Yeah, I own the property. I said, what do you want for it? He says, oh, I want $250,000. Thank God he said that. Because the museum would have failed down there, and we didn't realize it, because where the turnpike turns left at the next exit, 85% of my customers turn left to go see the mouse. They would have never drove by it. 10 years ago, the traffic count here was 250,000 cars every 24 hours. It's probably 3 times that now. In fact, they're getting ready to widen this interstate, and the governor sat right in my patio back here a month ago with all his cronies and all the press and all, and announced they're widening this interstate. And I mean, this is a really location. So anyway, we get a real estate agent. We tromp all through the woods down there from Lake Penisovsky all the way to Brooksville, and nothing was adequate for what we needed. It was not big enough, or it was too expensive, or was too far away from the interstate. I mean, we looked at everything, and it's not nighttime, and we're headed home. And I said to Pat, honey, let's get a room here in the Brooksville exit. There was a Holiday Inn there at that time. And let's pray about this. Maybe we're not supposed to be moving from this property. See, none of us know what the Lord has in stake for us. But let me tell you, folks, each and every one of you, there's a plan. And if you talk to him, he will guide you. So we talked to him. Let me tell you. We sat on our knees. We talked to him for 15 minutes. Got up the next morning. Went right through Wildwood. You couldn't have a museum here. It's just a big commercial truck stop. It's all it is. Plus, there was only one piece of property available. It was about a mile down the road. It was $375,000. Just now they're building on that piece of property. Now, this was the next exit. We come off that ramp. This was a totally undeveloped exit. There was a truck stop on the other side of the interstate with a Fanny's restaurant and a little Exxon station on this side, and a Stuckey's. And this big, beautiful piece of property, we wanted 16 acres. It just so happened that it was 16 acres, and the reason that comes out that way because that's the way they cut sections up. But there was no signs. And my wife, she just got giddy. She said, oh, honey, this was it. Look, we can put the museum right here. And she's pointing about where we are. And she says, the nice oaks up there. We could put our house up there in the oak trees. And I said, honey, I don't see any signs. Don't get too excited. So we pulled around to where the gate is. And that gate is there because that's where I stopped my car. I got out of the car. I got down in the ditch. I was going to pace it off to see how big it was. I knew how to do that. And as I got down in the ditch, there was a tiny little bush, and under that bush was a little sign about the size of this. And it said, for sale with a phone number. I said, honey, write down this number. She wrote down the number. I jumped in the car. We drove over to Stuckey's. I dialed the number. It's about 8 o'clock in the morning, and this lady answered the phone. She says, this is Shirley. What do you want? Well, Shirley just cut a knife through me. I mean, I'm thinking Shirley Muldowney, was beating me in the 1981 AHRA World Championships. I had not been beaten in that association until she did it. But of course, this wasn't Shirley Muldowney. This was another Shirley. And I said, ma'am, there's a piece of property over here on the interstate. It's got your phone number on it. It touches 475A and the interstate. She says, that's my property. What do you want to know about it? I said, I just want to know one thing. How much is it? She said, it's $80,000 cash. Now, if that don't bring the hair on the back of your neck. I said, I'll take it. She says, what are you going to do with it? I said, I'm going to put a museum on it. She said, you can't put a museum on it. It's agriculture. I said, I'll get the zone changed. She says, don't you think it would be prudent to get the zone changed before you buy it and put a deposit on it? I said, no, I want it just like it is. I'll take my chances with the commissioners. Because I figured they'd never leave a piece of property like this by exit at agriculture. And so she said, fine. 30 days later, I owned it. My wife and I came out here, and you know how your first piece, if you own a piece of dirt, you know, you walk on it. We walked down the southern fence line, and this man come running over to the fence. His name was Robert DuPont from the DuPont family. He said, I'm Robert DuPont, and we own this farm south of you, and we didn't know this property was for sale. We would like to buy it and have it join our property. We will give you $180,000 for it cash right now. Could have made a quick 100,000 just like that. And I'll tell you, in 1982, that's a lot of money. I said, Mr. DuPont, that's a generous offer, but I will never be able to sell this property as long as I'm alive. And he looked at me kind of strange. He said, why is that? I said, because God himself gave it to me. And I'll tell you, that's the truth. So we fast forward 1 year now. It's 1983, it's March. Well, that Dodge truck is setting. We had some sawhorses set up there, and we're building the half walls in this road. We were completely out of money. We used every dime. I had over $1 million of my assets converted into money and into all this when these doors opened. And a car pulls in. And a man and his wife got out and had three boys with him. 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And he said, is this the drag racing museum? I said, yes, sir, but we're not open. But these doors were open, and he just kind of walked in here and looked in. Everything that we own now in drag racing was in that 10,000 square foot room with room to walk around in. We are at 65,000 square feet now, and it's completely full. Tell me God doesn't have something to do with what's going on. Everybody just come up front and circle around. Yeah, we don't want to be back here.
No, you want to be behind this. Did you want this?
Oh, is it for me?
Yeah, that's your too, but if you're all set, you may want to.
This is Swamp Rat 12A. This was an experimental car. I have lots of experiments, a lot of failures. That's how you learn. I mean, you can put it on paper, and it might look good, but it's when the rubber hits the road that you really know whether you got something. This was too short, but the car before this, Swamp Rat 11, was just a little bit longer, but it was light. This one was lighter. We thought that was the way to go. So in 1967, this car was built and run in the 1968 series in California. We never won a race. Qualified several times, but it's too short. So we came back and we built Swamp Rat 12B. It was real long. Now that was a fine car. That was a car first over 240. It won the U.S. Nationals. It won the Spring Nationals. And it won the PDA Championships in California, which is the 6th race series in California. And if you can beat the Californians on their own tracks, you can say you did something. So we come back from California, and I sold this car to some kids with a small block Chevy. They made a real nice C dragster, and they ran it locally in Tampa until 1976. They got off the drag strip in Tampa Dragway, went up the bank, and tweaked the frame. And they brought it back to me. They wanted a new front half put on it. But by then I had the museum started, and I'm trying to retrieve all my cars that I'd actually driven. And so this was one of them. So I said, why don't I just build you a nice brand new chassis? I'll allow you $500 on your bent frame, and you give me $750 more, and you get a brand new car. Well, they liked that. And of course, it's for the Chevrolet. And so I did that, and they went their way. And this car sat around, and this was all when we were down in Tampa. So we drug all these parts around, and I came up here. And in 1987, 11 years later, I was going to go on a trip, and we're building Swamp Rat 31. That's the wrecked one on the stage in the back room. You get to see that. And the kid that was helping me, Mark Buchanan, I didn't want him working on my car while I was gone. So we took the car off the jig, we bought this car over and put it on the jig, and you could tell the front was tweaked. I says, Mark, I want you to put a nice new front half on this car for me. I come back from the trip and he done a really nice job. It looked great. We brought it back over here and put it in the building, which sat for 20 more years, till 2007. I got a call from Chrysler. I've been with Chrysler since 1961. I did 60 full years for them doing research and development. Well, they called me in 2007. They said, Mr. Garlits, we're shipping you 3 of the late model Hemi engines, the stage 3. We want you to take these engines and build us one supercharged nitromethane fuel motor like you was going to go fuel racing. We want to do some dyno testing. I said, I'll be happy to do that, but I wouldn't recommend dyno testing on nitro. I said, I think nitromethane and a dyno cell might not be a good idea, but that's none of my business. I said, I'll make you the engine. So we took one of the engines out of the box. We built all the manifolds, all the drive, everything you see. We had to change the pistons because it was too high compression. And we put it all together and I got ready to ship it to them. And I said, where would you like it to go? And they said, we've changed our mind about the dyno cell. You're right, it could be a problem. Do you have a car we could put it in? We would like to make a national television commercial with it. I said, I got just the car. So I sent them a picture of the car. I didn't have this nose piece on it because remember it's as light as you could get with just the back shorty body. And they said, well, you got to put a nose piece on it because we're going to partner with Win Oil Company for this commercial. So we put the nose on it. They come down here. This is a wrap on here, not paint. And we went down to Bradenton, made about 30 half passes. You can't make full runs because it doesn't have a legal cage. And they got some really nice footage. They did the commercial. Then they took the motor all apart and looked at it because that's what they were going to do on the dyno. It was just perfect. All the little bearings, everything was nice. It would make one heck of a fuel motor, but not like one of the big ones, but like if there was a B class, you know, like there used to be. It's just like the engine is actually like a small block Chevy with Hemi heads, is what it amounts to. But I noticed during the testing, the flames stand out of the exhaust pipes in broad daylight. And I said, this would make one hell of a cackle car. So that's what it's been. That was 2007. I've been all these years, and it's still cackling. I take it, in fact, I'm getting ready to take it on a couple of trips, and that on my appearances. And so we do it for the folks. It gets expensive though. The nitromethane has gotten so expensive. It costs about $100 to do what we're fixing to do. So we're going to start it, and it's noisy. So probably put your. Do we turn the fan on back there?
It's on. Actually, it's going to be better. It's going to be a little back here where it's not. I get to stand.
I would go towards that
You go around.
I got one set up for that.
Okay. Go around and get behind.
All the chassis work. The motor's not here right now. We had to we made some test runs with it and the brushes gave up because it's so much power. The battery pack is about the size of that box. But we got all that now. We're ready to try to set the record. But what we've got to find is a drag strip that's not sprayed. This car has got to spin the tires from the very start to the end, just like in 1964, because it's no clutch, and you don't want to pull that motor down to nothing because it causes problems. The motor wants to spin up, and so I got to find a drag strip. We might even have to use an Air Force runway. We know a general up in Youngstown, Ohio, that will let us go on the air base, but then we have to get the clocks out there. But we're about ready to go. The new brushes are in our hands. The motor people are putting it together. And of course, the battery pack, we've tested it. It works just fine. You see the black burnout marks when you come in the driveway? That's this car. Put those down, testing. It's going to be just fine. It's never run with the narrow rear. This takes 4 square foot of frontal area off the car. We know that's good for 3 or 4 miles an hour right there. Because the tires are the most destructive for wind resistance, because what a lot of people don't know, the bottom of the tire is stationary with the earth no matter what the speed is. But the top of the tire is going twice the speed of the car. It's like an air pump. Because remember, the tire's touching the strip as it goes by, but the top has to go twice the speed of the car it's going through. So it treats a tremendous amount. This tire will throw air all the way to the front wheels when it's going down course. I've seen that where it drives. I've watched them at Indianapolis in the rice ash, and you can actually see it happening at the end. And that's why I covered the little front wheels in 1986, because those are doing the same thing. And of course, I went 270 right away with it.
Don's personal garage.
Oh wow. That's pretty cool.
That's why this building was built so tall, because we always had in mind putting this mezzanine in. Chrysler 426 Hemi. It was a new motor to us. It was basically built for NASCAR, and it's a strong motor. I'll never forget the first one I ever saw at Cotton Owens. He had it on the dyno, and I stopped by Cotton's. I was good friends with Cotton Owens, still am in fact. And he had it on the dyno, and these engines from the factory with dual carburetors would put out about 425 horse, but you could actually blueprint them and get them up to about 440. So Cotton was experimenting with it. He'd take it up to 6,500 and down and up to 6,500 and checking the dyno. And when he got all the rings seated and everything, he put it at a steady 6,500, and it settled in at about 440 horse. And Cotton turns to me and says, "Let's go to lunch." I said, "What about the motor?" He says, "If it's still running when we get back, it'll be a good one." And it was still running when we got back. Chrysler wanted these engines. They were built with lots of strength so that through the race and the heat and everything, the engine would hold its integrity, the cylinder walls would stay round, the crankshaft would stay in the right place, everything would be nice, and it wouldn't start to tweak bearings and stuff. They wanted to make the 440 horse on the first lap and the 440 horse on the last lap. They couldn't beat these engines. They had to outlaw with a felt pen, and that's how they did it. This engine would have controlled everything, just like in drag racing today. It controls top fuel and funny car. It's not the same engine, it's the same configuration. In other words, you could take these heads and bolt them right onto John Force's funny car. It wouldn't work. But I mean, what I'm trying to tell you, the length and the bolt patterns and all is all the same. It's a testimony to the Ram Chargers and Tom Hoover, the head engineer on this engine. Which reminds me of a cute story. When I was doing the rear engine car, I was 3 months testing and I still hadn't got down the drag strip. And I mean, I was really having a hard time. And Chrysler was having a seminar in Clearwater, Florida for superstocks. And everybody was there that had a superstock and they could ask questions and the Ram Chargers would tell them what to do because they had a dragster, but that wasn't their main deal. Their main deal was their candy striped superstocks. And this one kid said to Tom Hoover, who was running the program, says, Mr. Hoover says, this question is not about a superstock, it's about Mr. Garlits over in Sefter with the rear engine project. He's been on it 3 months. What do you people at Chrysler think about that? And Tom Hoover thought a moment and he said, at Chrysler, we have always had the utmost confidence in all of Don Garlits' innovations. But this time, I'm afraid he's bit off more than he can chew. And that was a smart man. I mean, there's been so many attempts to make a rear engine car work, and it just never panned out. They most all crashed eventually. And in fact, when I showed up at Long Beach with mine for the first time, there had been a bad crash just 2 weeks before, and the driver was still over in the hospital. And they didn't want me to run because of that, but Jim Tice wanted me to run, the HRA guy. He didn't think about people getting hurt because he knew we took the risks and we knew the dangers. His job was to put, his famous saying was, butts on boards, the spectators. And the spectators was going to come out to see this rear engine car. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. This car had one of the very first Chrysler 426 Hemis in it, and Swingle drove it. I had my Swamp Rat 6B, which is in the museum, and Marvin Schwartz had the chassis research special, which was another 392 car, and that chassis is under the Roadster Dart. It's been modified and put under the Roadster Dart. And this original car got the front end cut off of it and lengthened way out, and it will be in the museum, Swamp Rat 10, the red and black car. The original Swamp Rat 8 is in there. This is a recreation because that car don't exist. It's 10 now. We renamed it 10. But when a car was like this, Swingle was driving it, and we all went to Bakersfield to probably the greatest top fuel race ever held in the history of the sport. It was the U.S. Fuel and Gas Championships, and there were 120 top fuel dragsters entered. There was hardly anything else going on. It was just about top fuel. They started running on Friday, and they never stopped running till the race was over on Sunday. They ran a 64-car field on Saturday afternoon. They ran a 32-car field on Sunday afternoon, and a 16-car field on Sunday afternoon. The winner of the 64-car field on Saturday night was me in Swamp Rat 6, so I got to sit out to run the winner of the 32-car field on Sunday. And Marvin Schwartz was driving Swamp Rat, the Swamp Rat that was a Garlits chassis special. So my wife and I slept in. It was raining a little that morning. We didn't rush to get out there. I wasn't going to have to run till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so I wasn't in any hurry. So we got to the track, and they had not run the first round yet, and Marvin was struggling with the new port injection system, which I had developed for these cars. I had been running port injections on my car since 1959, but nobody knew it. It was all hidden underneath. I have all of that too. It's all sitting over there. You'll see the cars are back there. You'll see them in a minute. Marvin says, give me a hand with this. I'm all confused. I don't know what to do. So I made a few adjustments on the thing and looked at what he's doing. I just made his car like mine. They were the identical motors. And then he said, would you drive it in the first round? I said, okay, Marvin. So I won the first round, and I come back and had a pretty tough guy for the next round. He says, would you drive it again? Sure. So I drove it again. I won. Long story short, I drove the car all day. I won the right to race myself. And I said, Marvin, I can't race the car now. You're going to have to get in it this time because I'm going my own car to run. Number one was built on a 1931 Chevy frame rail, and every time we find a nice set of frame rails, we redo one of the cars. We're going to do one more, the way the car looked when it outran Cook and Bedrock. But this is the way it looked when it went to the dragster for the first time, and then we quickly put a nice body on it with purple, because the guy that won the Nationals in 1956 was painted purple, so I copied it. And this car ran gasoline, had the state record for gasoline cars. And then we built the car that outran Cook and Bedrock that you don't see here. And then this is what we did to the car. This is the way it looked when 176 miles an hour in Brooksville. And then of course, it's been restored. The original car had been restored the way it went 180, and that's in the booth. And then this is the way the car looked when it won the big race at Riverside with the supercharger. And this is also how it looked when I got Barnsley in 1959 when the supercharger blew up. And it's also this configuration went 204.54 miles an hour, which is, I mean, that's a death-defying act in that roll cage configuration. And what's needed on this car is, this is the original #1 Enderley injector barn door, and this scoop was built personally by Ken Enderley on a Thursday night when he just got the injector done, but the scoops weren't there yet. The foundry hadn't done the scoops, and he wanted me to run this on my car in Bakersfield, California. So Ken Enderley personally made this scoop for the injector so I could run it that weekend. I just love the sound of that. All those tappets. I've driven this car all the way to Gainesville.
This was really an incredible experience, and the recollection that he has of stories and events that took place going back to the 40s and 50s is just incredible. But if you ever get a chance to visit the Don Garlits Museum, you should do so. It is very interesting, and the amount of stuff that he has back in the garage and in his personal areas is pretty insane too, and a lot of that stuff will make it to the museum. But I will come back and do another video in the museum, but this was just a behind the scenes with Don. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody.